Every Wednesday, William Henry's Revelations bring you a powerful half hour of information at the cutting edge of reality. Information that you cannot find anywhere else in the world. And now, here's William.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we have news about the search for the ruins of Atlantis. Most people are aware that a search for an Atlantean Hall of Records has been ongoing at Rostov, the Giza complex near the Sphinx, for decades. But Edgar Cayce, the source of the Hall of Records idea, stated that there were actually 3 identical record halls left by the Atlanteans. In the 1930s, Cayce referred to a Yucatan Hall of Records that was established nearly 13,000 years ago in a now submerged temple near the Bahamian island of Bimini. Mysteries researcher Dr. Greg Little and his wife Dr. Laura Little, who for the past 10 years have been investigating archaeological features in the Bahamas, have recently announced the discovery of a potential new underwater site 30 miles south of Bimini. It sits close to the edge of the Great Bahama Bank in 20 feet of water and has been named Brown's Ruins in honor of its finders, Esley and Krista Brown, professional divers from Bimini who work closely with Greg and Laura on their dive trips. Dr. Greg Little is a psychologist turned explorer and documentary maker. Since 2003, Greg and his wife Laura have been actively searching the Bahamas for archaeological ruins that might be linked to Atlantis, working with the Edgar Cayce organization in its Search for Atlantis project. Along with archaeologist Bill Donato, the Littles have conducted wide explorations around Bimini, Andros, and the Great Bahama Bank. Their explorations have been featured on the National Geographic Channel, the Learning Channel, MSNBC, Sci-Fi Discovery, and the History Channel. Greg is co-author of the books Edgar Cayce's Atlantis, Mound Builders, Ancient South America, and People of the Web, and has over 30 other books in print in various areas of psychology. So has an Atlantean temple been found in the Bahamas? We welcome Dr. Greg Little today, who will provide the answer. Welcome, Greg.
Well, hi, William. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on there. And I'll give you the answer in one word about to the question you posed. Has the Atlantean temple been found? Maybe.
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 Well, that's good enough. I mean, it's exciting that we're on the verge of confirming what Edgar Cayce said so long ago. Let's just begin, if you wouldn't mind, Greg, just for a moment, a little bit of background on Mr. Cayce and his predictions about the Atlantean temples.
Sure. Well, Cayce's probably best known for what are called his health readings. Cayce is the most famous American psychic, probably. That's the general opinion. He's the most famous psychic from America ever.
The Sleeping Prophet.
I'm sorry?
The Sleeping Prophet.
Yes, the Sleeping Prophet. Cayce had a method where he would go into, later it became a self-induced trance. Initially he was hypnotized back in the days of mesmerism, and that was in the 1890s, and then he realized he could do it himself. In this self-induced trance, a person that they called a conductor would then ask Cayce a series of questions, and then he would begin speaking in a different voice, giving some answers to these questions, whatever they were, and he claimed that he had no memory whatsoever of what he said while he was in this psychic trance. He gave health readings mainly. He started by answering questions from individuals that were having extremely perplexing health problems. You got to remember now, this was in the late 1800s, and at that time, medicine really was not very advanced, and so there were not a lot of remedies for problems that we pretty much take for granted today. He became very famous because of these health readings, mainly because a group of doctors studied him. They actually came to Hopkinsville, Kentucky. They studied Cayce, and then they wrote a number of reports up, and they gave a report at the American Medical Association in New York City. The New York Times then started running a series of articles about Cayce, and he became very famous. In the 1920s, his readings took a turn, and that's where this Atlantis and ancient history comes in. He was asked, he was blindsided by this. He had no idea that he was going to be asked these questions, but he was asked about the ancient world. And lo and behold, in these readings, he started talking about Atlantis, even more ancient civilizations in the world, and there were more and more questions that were posed to him. In 1927, he started talking about Bimini, and that's where he started linking Bimini to Atlantis. And it was a group of investors in Florida that were interested in whether or not oil could be found in the Bahamas, whether or not Bimini, which is a small island about 50 miles due east of Miami, if Bimini could be turned into a resort. And then shortly thereafter, they started asking Casey about gold in the Bahamas, and he talked about gold at Bimini. But in the course of all this, he said that Bimini had once been a portion of Atlantis. He called it Poseidia, which is the name of the main island of Atlantis. And, of course, Atlantis was named by Poseidon, who was one of the Greek gods. So that's how it all started. There was a lot of research in the late 20s and early 30s where people tried to find gold, and then a lot more started happening in the 50s and 60s. And then in the 60s, it really took off because Casey said a portion of Atlantis would be rising again and found in 1968 and 1969, and that it would be somewhere in the Bahamas near Bimini. That's kind of a synopsis.
And did he give us any indication? I mean, Greg, you've, in the past decade or more, you and your wife, Laura, have taken 25 self-funded trips in search of this temple of Atlantis or Poseidia. What drives you? What are you looking for, Greg? What do you think you're going to – what is it that's there that's got you locked on and loaded and ready to go?
Well, I really can't answer that question in any easy fashion because I'm not – a lot of people think that I'm obsessed with it, but I'm not. I do a lot of other things. I'm very involved in professional activities in the area of criminal psychology. I started this initially because of something that Andrew Collins, a British author, had written about in a book. And I decided that it's something I always wanted to do. We had the means, the logistics were available, so we started by going to the bottom of an island called Andros to find a formation that was found in 1968 and seemed to be very odd, an underwater stone circle. So we managed to get to that spot. We found out it was not, in fact, a stone circle. But then we started finding a lot of other things. And we had some time, and we just decided that we were going to conduct this search. We basically give the ARE, which is the Casey organization, credit for almost everything. But, yes, it's been self-funded. It's not as a big as obsession as it may seem. 25 weeks sounds like a lot. But over 10 weeks, that's an average of 2.5 weeks a year. We've taken 4 or 5 week-long trips in some years, and then one in 1 year, and then 2 to 3 most of the other years. So it's not as big an obsession.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe Casey's reading?
I believe Casey's health readings a lot. But
what about the one about Atlan as the high priest?
Well, that I do not know. I'm not exactly a skeptic, and I'm not exactly a believer. Skeptics, to me, are simply disbelievers. You know, they love to put people down and say, well, this person's a true believer. They don't go with facts. Well, there's such a thing as a true disbeliever, and that's become the name. That's become the term for a skeptic. And I'm in the middle. I'm looking for the truth. I do know this now. Over all these trips, I became convinced pretty early that there's an unknown civilization that was in the Bahamas. It was a maritime culture. We found evidence of it in many, many places, and I became aware that the skeptics were actually perpetrating the same frauds that they considered the believers to be perpetrating, and that the truth was somewhere between.
So we have not found just unbelievable.
But are Casey's stories true? I don't know. I find it very interesting, and there's a lot of evidence that points toward Casey being right about most of his ancient world readings. So let's just get right to your recent announcement at Montgomery Bell State Park near Nashville in October 2012. A couple hundred people are gathered for an ARE conference, and you've got news. So tell us about it. Well, my wife gave the presentation. Actually, I didn't speak at all. Didn't want to. I actually filmed it because we're making a film about this. What we did was this. Last year, it was last August, 2 days before we were scheduled to take our next trip to the Bahamas. And at that point, we were looking for some planes, Bermuda Triangle planes. We knew where they were. They were underwater, and we had to go find them. But 2 days before we went down, the Browns, who actually live in Bimini now, it's Krista and Esley Brown. They run dive operations. They're fishermen, and they're both boat captains. But they called us very excitedly and said they found this formation. It does not look natural, and it's got a lot of stones. They had no idea how many. They just said there's a lot. It's piled high, and you've got to see this. So last August, we went there on the last day of that trip because we took a 17-hour run in a boat down the Great Bahama Bank, and then, of course, It took 17 hours to get back. And as we did this over the days, we visited a lot of sites. But when we got to this site, there was, which is 30 miles south of Bimini, there's very little we could do there but film and just look in the water a bit because it's a site you can only visit for an hour a day, and that is astonishing. We've never seen anything like this. And when the tides are moving, it's like a river flowing over this thing, and it's a great big sort of hump underwater. So we went back this year and spent 3 days at the site, and that was just a few months ago. And we have a few stones that we gathered and actually sent them off to some of the top geological labs in the United States, and we got reports back on that. We were able to measure the site, and this takes a bit of imagination for people to understand the size. This is a site that has literally thousands and thousands of massive blocks of stone. The blocks vary from small building blocks up to huge beams, columns, massive rectangular blocks. We've measured a lot of these. There's an example, one we called the refrigerator because from the surface it looked like a huge refrigerator. It was 8 feet long, 3.5 feet wide, and 2.5 feet thick. We know what kind of stone it is, and I'll get that to a minute, but that thing weighs almost 4 tons, that one stone. There are hundreds of stones as big as that one and thousands that are almost as large or even larger. So
have you ever seen anything like this, Greg, anywhere else in the world?
No, hadn't either. We've seen a lot of stuff in the Bahamas. We've been to literally hundreds of sites. We've never seen anything like this. This is totally different and unique. The Browns have been almost everywhere in the Bahamas, and they've never seen anything like it either. That's why they were so excited about it. So the site's named after them. But it is 530 feet long. That is almost the size, the length of a not the most recent aircraft carriers, but aircraft carriers from, say, the Vietnam era. It's about the size of an aircraft carrier down there.
It's about 2 football fields long.
Yeah, it's 2 football fields long, and it is 160 feet wide. It is a sort of an irregular teardrop-shaped formation. All around this is a flat sandy bottom, which is 20 feet deep, and then it's covered with turtle grass around this formation. And all of a sudden, you got this massive mound rising up. And when I call it a mound, it's not really a mound per se. It's a big hump. In the middle, at the top, there are many, many square and rectangular slabs of stone that are sitting at the very top. And then it looks like tumbling off of it were lots of other stone, including columns, long, rounded columns that look like they came from Central America or Greece, which actually the Maya used columns. And there are also fluted columns, which is absolutely bizarre.
You can detect they're actually fluted columns. You've seen the actual shape of them.
Oh, yeah, we've measured them. We have measured the fluted columns. We have lots of close-up pictures. And this gets even weirder. The stones, the geological labs, actually I don't want to give their names out yet because we have not completed all this yet, and they don't really know exactly what it was that we were looking at. So they gave us a lot of reports on this. We have a thorough analysis, scientific analysis done on the content. They're made out of what is called a metamorphic rock, which is caused by pressure, but it's schist, S-C-H-I-S-T. And it is a type of blue schist. Underwater, it looks purple or blue, and it glows.
glows blue-purple. That
glows
is phenomenal.
blue-purple, and 16% of the stone is an average of 16% of all the samples is quartz crystal. So when the sun hits it, it's like thousands of little tiny sparkles of light coming off of it, going in all different directions. Now, when you get it to the surface, it looks black, except when you are looking at it and the sun hits it, then you're sort of blinded by all these quartz crystals in it. One of the fluted columns had opal on the exterior of it, opal splotches, which is very bizarre.
Beautiful.
This type of schist does not come from the Bahamas. There is no such thing as schist in the Bahamas. There is some that is very similar in Jamaica, and this is where the geologists got absolutely stumped by it. And these are university geologists. One's a full professor who's the expert in the Jamaican schist, and he said that it's identical to the Jamaican schist. The only problem is all the Jamaican schist like this is in a mountain deep inland, and the other problem is there are no known quarries there at all. And he said this is very clearly quarried. This is a quote. This is very clearly quarried stone, quarried for some purpose. But what it is, I do not know. So what we have here is this massive remains of something that looks like it was struck repeatedly, and all this material at the top fell off the sides. It's made out of a type of stone that isn't there. There are no boat remains under it. There's nothing under it at all but the bottom. Oddly, and I'll get to this in a minute, we know it was there in 1906 because a ship hit it in 1906.
Mm-hmm.
And there are actually 3 stories in the New York Times about this ship hitting it because there's such a weird story. But when the ship hit it, it was a wooden 3-masted ship, and the bottom of the ship broke open, and it immediately stopped on top of this and started filling full of water, but it didn't sink. And what I said is it's in 20 feet of water, but it comes up, depending on the tide, to 3 to 7 feet from the top. So you look like you're in deep water, but if you have a boat that has a draft that's over 3 feet when it's low tide or 7 feet in high tide, you're going to hit this thing. So when this ship hit it, the captain thought that they were actually in Florida, figured out where they needed to go, and they went 25 miles north to an island called Cat Key. From there, they went to Nassau, and these stories are just incredible because their voyage was so amazing. While they were in Nassau, a Bahamian salvage company got the location and went over to this site and took the ship apart, tore it apart to salvage all the wood, but they left all the nails there. So this thing is covered with hundreds of these nails from the 1900s that are long, square-headed brass nails. So those are there, but there's no wood, there's no other metal, there's nothing under any of the stones. And, of course, the boat that hit it wasn't 300 feet long, and we know exactly what it was carrying. It had nothing on it but 9 passengers and a lot of sand being used as ballast. So the sand slipped out and went all over this formation.
I see.
And basically covered it up.
We have to take a quick break. It's a truly enigmatic discovery as you describe it. When we come back, let's talk about a little bit more about the schist and the possible connection between Greek and Roman ruins, maybe even Crete,
Absolutely.
and see if we can't find some more information about what it is exactly we're dealing with here. This is Revelations. We'll be right back. This is Revelations. We're continuing with Dr. Greg Little. We're speaking with Greg about his article, Search for Atlantis Project 2012. Has Casey's Temple of Poseidon's been finally been found? The article is available at Greg's website, which is apmagazine.info. So, Greg, before the break, we were talking about the schist and this remarkable glowing blue-purple structure that you've discovered. Talk with us about, where do we go from here with this? Are you going to try to make a connection with maybe Crete or Greece or Rome as possible origin for the schist, or where are you going to go from here?
We know that a lot of Greek ruins were actually built from schist. Most people, and I did before we saw this report from the geologist telling us that it's schist, I thought that almost all the Greek ruins were made out of limestone or granite or were made out of marble. But as I found out, there were loads of ruins in Greece including Delphi, and there's a mountain at Delphi that is made out of schist that they actually quarried schist from to use in ruins. Also, Malta has loads of ruins made from schist. Schist was also mined as long ago as 9,000 years in Norway, which is very odd. We found that out because they said the schist in the Bahamas is a little similar to that in Norway. So, I mean, to me, it's all new territory. I know that in South and Central America, some schist was used in sites. And oddly, the weirdest artifact probably ever found in Egypt, which is a disc. It's a strange, polished disc that's about a foot in diameter, and it's in the Egyptian National Museum in Cairo. It is made out of schist. I didn't even know you could polish it. But it polishes up and is very, very nice. It looks a lot like marble. So where we go from here, we have officially notified the Bahamian government, the correct agencies, about this find. We now know that it is a true archaeological site. We didn't know that until we actually knew that this was schist. At that point, Bahamian laws kick in, and we will proceed by trying to put together a group of geologists and or archaeologists that can go there and do a little more work. We can go to this site and we can film it. We can continue to measure and look under it and so on. But we're really limited as to any more we can do without getting a permit for this site. And we haven't done that yet because it's only been a month ago that we found out what this was.
And do you hold any hope that this could be the temple described by Casey that contains one of the Hall of Records?
This is definitely something, and with those, it's something that's real, and with those columns there, columns were almost always used at temple sites. Columns are not always used in buildings where people live. It is a massive structure, and according to Casey's readings, the temple or temples that were at Bimini, he never talked about anything else with them, that they were put in places that were remote and they were designed to survive, but they were not in the middle of cities. So you wouldn't find a great deal of material around them, and that all that matches this site. And Casey said, look south of Bimini. He said you should go south and do a survey right along the edge of the Gulf Stream at the Great Bahama Bank, and that is right where this thing is. So everything matches precisely what Casey said. So do I have hope? Yeah, I have some. I just don't know, and I don't get overly excited. I'm just, we'll see where it goes.
Well, yeah, it's incredible, and one wonders, what do you think would be in that Hall of Records, Greg?
Well, Casey said straightforward what's in it. There are 32 stone tablets. On the 32 tablets is a record of the history of humanity, starting at the beginning and going up to the time when Atlantis was destroyed around 10,000 BC or so. And he said that there were various instructions and schematics of what he called a firestone. Initially, it was called a Tui stone, and it was a stone employed for communication with the spirit world or God. And that was in use in Atlantis early. And then over time, they realized that they could take this stone, which was some sort of a crystal, and that they could alter it and put it in the sun and collect the sun's rays and make a weapon out of it. And then it became a firestone. But Casey said in the Halls of Records there are instructions as to how to use this firestone and the Tui stone. So that's supposedly what's there. And
would we know what to do with it if we discovered it?
Well, I don't know. Casey said that when the records are actually first found, it will take some time to decipher the language that they're written in. They're written in a mixture of hieroglyphics from pre-Egyptian times, which whatever that means, and some other languages. So it would take some time to even decipher them. But the story that's on them, Casey's readings actually gave, and it's a story about spirit beings or spirit energy entering into the physical plane and eventually entering into the animal world and eventually entering into the human form, and then we became trapped here, and slowly but surely as we got more and more trapped in this physical world, our motives became more in line with self-aggrandizement and the accumulation of wealth. And as we did that, power became a motivation, and ultimately we became at war with ourselves and lost our spiritual connection. That is what Casey says is in the Hall of Records, that story. Of course, he gives a lot more detail than I just went through.
So, presumably, I mean, you're describing the Bahamian government's response must be kind of curious. You wonder, are they going to protect the site? Are they going to allow other individuals to dive at the site, to explore? Do you have any kind of, do the Browns have any kind of a claim on the discovery in terms of being able to have access to it?
No, they don't. Here's where that is. In fact, I just saw the first Bahamian response today. I got it this morning, forwarded to me from the Browns. And basically, it's that, okay, our archaeological laws cover it now because it's an archaeological site. We can, like I said, we can go to it and look at it. We cannot now legally tell anybody where it is. And saying that it's 30 miles south of Bimini, let me tell you, that's nothing, because if anybody got
covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, they'd never be able to find it anyway. But the Bahamian laws apply. We could take some people there and look at it. We can continue to film it, but we can't really remove anything. We can't move anything around now until the permits are obtained. And actually, with the way it works there, it takes about a year to get a permit approved. So, but we have some archaeologists that we work with. Bill Donato is one, and he has a permit, so we may be approaching Bill very soon about going there and doing some initial work. But we're going to go do a side scan sonar on it so we can get a very precise, almost photographic image of it, because right now what we have are loads of pictures and then 3 hours of film. But it's so large and so close to the surface that when you go over it with the film and film it, you really can't tell how big these stones are unless you have someone on the bottom there that gets in the picture, because it's so massive. It's actually deceptive when you look at pictures and film.
You need a reference point. As you're talking, Greg, I'm wondering, do you think the Hall of Records in Giza, Piedras Negras, and Bimini are linked? Might we be able to expect some revelations or some occurrences around the other Hall of Records now that this one possibly has been discovered? And it's almost like maybe they're time-coded or something is what I'm asking.
Odd you'd say that. I was looking at Piedras Negras earlier this morning for information there. Really, nobody is going to Piedras Negras now but government officials who are actually affiliated with stopping drug supplies. There's been a number of murders in the area, a lot of gun battles. Some drug lords have been taken prisoner there or captured by the government. But right across the border there is Chiapas, Mexico, and that's the main portal for cocaine from South America. So that's a dangerous place. I'm not sure we'll go back there, but Egypt does look very promising right now. There are some things. Of course, Andrew Collins back, I believe it was 2006, found a cave system under Giza. And then Zahi Hawass said that it wasn't there. And, of course, then Zahi went in with a film crew for a show, Chasing Mummies. And then when he wanted to prove that it didn't go all the way under the pyramids, which Andrew Collins speculated it probably might. He didn't say it did, but he said it might. We know for sure that the archaeologists who actually accompanied Zahi Hawass did not go to the end of it, and that is for certain. There is a plan right now. They wanted to go back and actually explore it all the way, but they needed more equipment because one of them got stuck in a tube. He crawled 30 feet into this tube, and then it split off into a Y, and that's actually where he stopped. On the show Chasing Mummies, and the actual episode was called Bats, you see him saying, yeah, I've reached the end, but he didn't. He just decided, I'm not going any further because he was afraid he couldn't turn around in there. There is evidence now for certain that it goes further. There is a plan for Egyptian archaeologists and spelunkers, which are cave people, to go in and actually explore it all the way to the end, and if necessary, to use a robot camera to go in. We know now it does go probably all the way to the second pyramid, and it may go further. And a lot of that hasn't been released. Very few people know this. I believe most of the central people in the Casey organization know, because that has been openly announced at several of the major meetings. But these aren't the conferences that the public goes to. These are meetings for the core people there. So that is going to take place, and soon. I'm not sure when the results will come out of it, but it has to be Egyptian archaeologists. And, of course, Egypt is in a mess right now.
Absolutely. And it's just, it's almost as if there's a race against the clock here to open some of these sites while we still can, before perhaps there's a real shift to fundamentalism in Egypt.
Absolutely. And it is distinctively possible that Westerners will not be welcome at all in Egypt at some point. That is distinctively possible.
Well, Islam's plan is to take over the entire planet, to raise the Muslim flag over the White House and beyond. So this is just, they promised this. This is their reality, and they seem to be.
Well, it's a step-by-step process, and they're starting in the Middle East, where their religion is centered, and they're just, obviously that is what they're doing. But that's sort of a political and religious thing, and I try to not pay any attention to it. Yeah. But it has an effect in Egypt, that is for certain.
Absolutely. Greg, let's talk about mound builders for a few minutes. Is that okay?
Okay.
One of my favorite subjects that I know that you study as well is the Orion-Giza correlation, but then Andrew Collins once again steps up and says it's not Orion-Giza, it's actually, or Giza-Orion, it's Giza-Cygnus. Yeah. And you've been working on researching the mound builders of
Let me tell you a little thing about this. I didn't know this until recently, because I have a book out called The Illustrated Encyclopedia of Native American Mounds and Earthworks, and in that I talked a bit about Cygnus, but not much, and I didn't talk much about Orion. Now, here's what has happened since that book has come out. I have found that mainstream archaeologists have been working on some 1800s era mythology that they got from tribes, and they have finally deciphered some of the most mysterious artifacts ever found at mounds. For example, there is the eye in the hand symbol.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, it's very famous. Most people put the fingers up, but in Native American iconography, the fingers go down. And the eye in the hand is this. What it means is this. And it's on the most famous one in America came in this massive disc that was found at Moundville, Alabama, at a very famous site. But you actually turn the fingers down. It represents a severed hand, and the wrist is 3 stars, and that is Orion's belt. The wrist is a severed wrist, and the 3 stars form the severed wrist. Down below, the eye. The eye is a very fuzzy sort of constellation known as Messier 42. That is a portal. And what they have done is they have now taken Native American beliefs, and this is a massive thing in itself. We could talk about this for hours, but they've
I'd love to have you back just to go through this in detail.
Yeah, this is really cool stuff. The Native Americans believe this. At death, they had to make this journey to the west. They would then reach the edge of the earth. Below the earth, when you looked down, you saw this watery underworld, and there was a panther in there. They called it a water panther. This is another whole set of constellations. But there was this 10-minute window when the soul had to jump to this severed hand in the sky and hit this hole called Messier 42, this constellation. From there, then, this is the first step. That's in Orion's belt. From there, then they had to travel south, and that south journey led them right along the Milky Way. And when they reached the dark rift of the Milky Way, they had a choice point. And if you actually look at the dark rift, it splits. There's 2 paths you can take. One path leads to a dead end, and here they would encounter this being that actually was called a brain smasher. That is the actual translation of the Native American word for it. And what it means is, the brain smasher is the term. If you took the wrong path, this is where your soul was weighed, your existence was obliterated. But if you took the other path, you reached a star in a particular constellation, and that star was Deneb, which is the main star of Cygnus. And from there, you popped through a hole into the other world. So both, into the heavens. When I say the other world, you pop into the heavens. So both Orion's belt and Cygnus are involved in the Native American belief system about what the souls do and how to get back to heaven, to the world where all souls start and all souls end. It's a very, very strange thing. It caught me off guard. I wrote a couple articles about it, but that's actually the next book I'm writing about this very
wonderful.
strange belief
I've had opportunities to speak with Dr. Arthur Cushman, a Nashville neurosurgeon who believes, I'm paraphrasing, that ancient Nashville, Tennessee, was a site where people came to learn this Stargate metaphysics and how to jump through the Milky Way.
He's probably absolutely correct about that. I'm familiar with Cushman. He believes Deneb, I've seen some of his writings, Deneb is the spot where the souls go from the Milky Way to heaven. And yes, Nashville has a lot of huge mound sites around it. Most people there don't know it. But you have some massive sites there. Franklin has hundreds of mounds at one particular site. But there's loads of them in the Nashville area.
Yeah, it's incredible, and it's so exciting, isn't it, Greg, to be in a modern city, Nashville, you're in Memphis, or to be in the Bahamas and be just a breath away from this ancient knowledge and the revelation or recreation of this knowledge.
Absolutely. I recommend Americans can go out almost anywhere and visit an Indian mound site and get yourself enmeshed in it. Sit out there and just kind of absorb it. Sit on top of a mound, walk around the sites, try to absorb it. Or if you're not in basically the eastern half of the United States, or where most of the mounds are, not all, but otherwise go to some of the ruins in the western states and sit and do the same thing. Our archaeological wonders in this country are just as amazing as those anywhere else in the world.
That's what I tell people. If you can't make it to Egypt, if you can't go to Peru, come to Nashville.
Right.
Come to Moundville, Alabama, Spiro Mound, Ohio Valley. This whole area, you draw a circle 250 miles out from Nashville, and you're going to hit some amazing ancient sites.
Absolutely. Portsmouth, Ohio, Newark, Ohio is the most incredible geometric earthworks in the world. They're the most extensive and the most incredible. They are a computer. It's a gigantic thing that even the people in Newark don't know about. We went to Newark, Ohio, and asked people where this site was when we first went, and nobody could tell us. And they said, I've never heard of anything like that. And even people who, we did a tour there, and the bus driver that we had grew up in Newark. He didn't even know this enormous site even existed. And when we went there, he was just overwhelmed. He said, why wasn't I taught this in school? So there's sites everywhere in this country. It is an amazing thing. Get into mounds, people. They are really very, very interesting, and they're very spiritual.
And for today, Greg, you leave us with this incredible picture of a glowing blue-purple possible temple complex in Bimini that may, in fact, be Casey's Hall of Records or the Atlantean Hall of Records.
I believe that, too. It may very well be. And I'm telling you, when you see, we're going to put out some film on this soon, but when you see the sunlight hitting this stuff underwater, when it's going through and refracting through the water, it's just incredible to look at the flashes of light coming off this.
It's one of the most incredible things and most exciting things I've heard in a very long time. And thank you so much, Greg, for taking the time to share this with us today.
Thank you. Love your show. Love Whitley's show. You guys are great.
Thank you, Greg, and be well, and good luck in your further searches.
Okay. Thank you.
This has been Revelations. Thank you for listening. See you next time.
Attending a William Henry presentation is unforgettable. Keep up with his schedule at williamhenry.net. You've been listening to William Henry's Revelations on Dreamland Radio. Next Wednesday, another cutting-edge revelation from William Henry.